a little illustration. I feel like I'm hosting a game show. Yeah. But that's not what we were going for. This is not a competition. If it was, I think Linda and Mark have won. Wonderful. So if you can just think about your relationship journey, your relationships journey of dating, maybe in marriage, as a map. And everyone here has a map. We all operate or aim to operate with specific boundaries. Okay? And those are sort of the ridges of the map. We realize there are boundaries God has given us, and we all really agree with those objective boundaries, and we function within it. But inside our maps, there are key points that most of us will have. So we all start in a pond with fish. All right? And so that's sort of when we're single, we're in this pond, and there's many fish. And then you pair up with a cute fish, okay? And you and this cute fish might take a little bit of a journey down a stream, and that's your dating life now. And if that doesn't work out, you go back to the pond, and that's okay. But eventually you find the right fish, and you start dating up the stream, and eventually when you feel like you want to commit to this fish, you propose and get engaged, and you get out the water, all right? Because you're an amphibian, apparently. Once you're on the land, you start making your journey as an engaged couple towards Marriage Mountain, because that's the big one. You've got to get married, wedding day is important, and you make your way to Marriage Mountain, and you get married. And once you get over the mountain, it opens up into this beautiful, calm, peaceful meadow where everything's great and everything's wonderful, and you might have some kids, which are a blessing from the Lord. You might not have some kids, that's also a blessing from the Lord, and it's really just about enjoying life after that. And every one of us, our maps will have those markers. Okay? We'll likely have those markers. And there might be some similarities, but all our maps will be unique. And we've got a bunch of maps that we're going to learn from tonight, but I wanted to use that illustration to point out 3 mistakes that we can make. We can believe that there is maybe only one way, and I don't think that's right. To think that our map is the only map and it's the right map is a bit proud, and we need to be cautious against that and be humble. The second thing is we can maybe try and copy someone else's map. But no 2 people are the same, and no 2 maps are the same. And so when we take someone else's map as the only map and we start to impose what they've done on our lives, we actually might be dissatisfied and end up sad. And the third mistake is this, is to think that we cannot learn from other people's maps. And there is wisdom to be learned from other people. And so we want to look at the maps of these people. We want to learn from their stories, but we're not here to do comparison. We're here to just hear their stories, maybe some mistakes, a lot of wisdom, and we're going to hear what we can learn and trust God to use that and execute that in our lives. And our aim is this, that we would learn from wisdom in community. So I'm going to pray for us, and then we're going to get straight into it. So why don't you bow your heads. Yeah, Father God, we just thank you for marriage. Thank you that it is a good thing. That it is something you designed, and as the designer, you know how it works. And yet you have left it quite open for us. There are a lot of things that you have said are important and blessings that we should strive for as people who want to be married. And you have said it is a way to reflect the gospel, but there's also just a lot of openness. And yet you have called us to learn wisdom from being in community. And so I pray for us who hear, that we would have open hearts, that we would come with open postures, not with critical spirits. And we would bless and honor these couples who share vulnerably with us, and we would receive from them. And I pray mostly, God, that your Holy Spirit would be bringing revelation and understanding for us where we need it. I pray there would be an atmosphere of peace and joy and love in this place that we share together. Amen. Okay, so I'm going to ask our panelists to just go through and introduce themselves and to just share a quick, and one of you can do this, just a quick 2-minute summary of your relationship, your story. Just a 2-minute summary, meeting, dating, engagement, marriage. Okay, up to the...
We'll start at this end, if you don't mind. Because I just wanted you to note 2 things. Firstly, that obviously the much older couple have got notes because we might forget what we need to say. And secondly, that you'll notice that the couple that's been married the longest, the man has the mic. So guys, you need to just make sure that you stay in control.
I said I'd answer this question. Mark came to the church I attended. He was asked to come there and tell what it was like to be a Christian in the army. Yes, he's that old. He had to do the army. And I do have a weakness for men in uniform. And he did look very handsome in his uniform. And I had to help him find the house where we had coffee after church because there were no GPSs. And he didn't know where to go. And so I offered to help him. And when we got home, there was a note on the fridge from my mother saying, feel free to invite Mark for lunch on Sunday, which I did. And to cut a long story short, we met in January, we got engaged in July, we got married in December. I was 22, he was 24, and next Friday is our 33rd anniversary.
Awesome.
And I know we mustn't go on too long, but I must just tell you the first date was rather traumatic because, you know, the first date's always like, let's go to movies. So I pluck up the courage and ask Linda to go to movies, and she says, well, can't we rather do something else because we don't really know each other, and if we go to movies, we're just going to sit there and we won't be able to talk. So it was quite traumatic. But I managed to hatch a good plan. We went up Table Mountain and out to supper, and I mean, the rest is history.
Wonderful.
Okay, I've just been told that I will take this one. Yeah, so Rolls and I, we studied together and worked together at a church in East London, and we were just good friends, as they all do. And anyway, so after a couple of years of being friends, he was in other relationships, I was in another relationship. Yeah, when we were single after a while, he just started liking me, kept wanting to have these talks. Actually, I started liking him, and I wanted to have these talks. And anyway, after years and years of friendship, a couple of talks, and no, we're just friends. Finally, the Lord opened his eyes to what a wonderful person I was. Took him a while, and anyway, so long story short, we started dating after Roland accepted the call here. We started dating, we did a year apart, we got engaged in November. I moved here in with Pastor John and Terry in the January. We got married in the March. And yeah.
How long have you been married?
Ooh, almost 6 years.
So I'm going to take the first part because this doesn't make sense if I don't say this. So I actually met Kelly in this church building, and I remember I was actually on the worship team that night. I wasn't leading yet, I was too young. I hadn't got to that stage, you know. Not that you have to be at a particular age. Also, dig myself into a hole often. I was playing electric guitar, and I noticed this very attractive woman in the second row, and I was very distracted that time of worship. And when my sister went over to go say hi to her friend, I thought that would be my opportunity to go and meet the new person. And I went there and I said hi to her, and we just said hi. And that's all we said at that time.
So something interesting about that night was the friend that had brought me here turned to me at the point after we had just met, and she was like, you should totally marry that guy. And we got married. Not straight away though. We, you know, you're in a church, make it official. No, so we hung out a little bit for about a month, and then we made it official, started dating, and then 5 years later we got engaged, and then, yeah, that was 2009 when we started dating, and we've now been married for 2.5 years.
Wonderful. So as you can see, we've got couples from a variety of seasons. We've got the relatively newlyweds, and we've got some also newlyweds but with little kids. Beautiful boy and a girl. And then we've got the experts on that side who have adults as children and grandchildren, which are also a real blessing. So I was wondering if you could share with us some of the challenges and blessings of your current season, just the space that you're at. From your perspective, what do you see as a challenge and a blessing? And for Mark and Linda, you guys can speak backwards as well, maybe speak into the teenage years, which is a real blessing. For their children. All right, but let's start on this side. Glenn and Kelly, can you maybe just share into that?
So I'll start with the blessings. So one of the beautiful things about being married is at night we can say goodnight and go to sleep. We don't have to say goodbye and drive I used to have to drive like half an hour to get home. And it's just such a beautiful thing being able to do life together and share a home and just do like normal things together, like cleaning the house and cooking supper and stuff. And so that's one of the things that I think is such a huge blessing, is just doing life with each other.
And a challenge, or one of the blessings actually on that as well, is for me, I'm a very company-oriented person. I love being with people, and I also just love having company. Even if I'm not chatting with her, if she's just in the room, that's really nice for me. And it was a weird thing, like when I was a kid, I often used to have times where I'd struggle falling asleep because I was alone by myself. And it's a strange thing, but it's like just having someone in that room with me when I fall asleep is so beautiful for me. Very special. And I know that probably sounds awkward, but I ran this past her. And a challenge for us is because we have non-traditional jobs. A challenge for us is we spend a lot of time together, which is amazing. But for us, we've got to be intentional about making quality time together, because it's very easy to spend time together. And then we can be like, oh, we spend time together, let's go and see another person. But we've got to just be aware that we've got to be spending quality time together.
Awesome. So for us, the blessing of this season has just been an abundance of character growth and wisdom. All right? And I say that seriously. I don't mean that in a funny way, although it is funny. I think just, you always hear your parents say, you will only know this when you have your own kids, all right? And it's so true. So we're in that season where we're like, oh my goodness, that's why they said that, or that's why this is important. And we're just in that season where it's just wisdom. God's just pouring that out. I'm just seeing that. Huge character growth in a good way, and getting to be parents is awesome. So I think learning to be parents, getting to see God's heart for us through being able to parent is just a huge blessing. So that's a massive blessing of the season. The challenge is being parents, right? So the challenge is, I think, learning to be a married couple with children and prioritize ourselves as well as be great parents. I think that's a massive challenge. It sounds simple and understated, but that's in a nutshell one of the hugest challenges we've had. So yeah, that's it.
I think for us, the blessings of the season has been inheriting a son, or not inheriting, but with one of our daughters marrying, we now have a son. So that's been very exciting. We now have an adult married couple as part of our family. And then double blessings is a grandchild. We've got a 9-month-old granddaughter. And that's a wonderful stage to be in, to have fun, not like these folk that are in every moment of it. We can have the fun bits and then hand her back when for her mom and dad to have the bad nights. But it's really such a blessing. I get into trouble because I post pictures on Instagram of my granddaughter, and then the person gets upset because I beat her to it. So I've got to check with her first which pictures I'm allowed to post. And I think another blessing of the season is when you get to our stage. I think there's less striving, especially career-wise. I don't need to prove anything to anybody, and sort of not aiming for the next promotion. So I'm really enjoying that stage in life where I can sometimes say what I feel. When you're younger, you sometimes don't want to speak out because you don't want to kind of upset or offend. And as you get older, you do get braver in terms of kind of speaking your heart and speaking your mind. What's also nice is having a bit more disposable income. Having educated twin daughters that studied for a long time. They're now both working, and so that's great to have a bit more money and more time to spend together, because obviously with adults it's less demanding. That we want more time for each other, so that's very exciting. And then on the challenges side, I think the empty nest is quite a tough thing to adjust to. We've been a very close family, and it's the natural thing, but when adult children move out, get married, our daughter Robin's moving up to Johannesburg to start a new job in January, so one's got to get used to living more on your own and being less close in terms of time spent with children. The other reality, which is not that pleasant, is actually seeing our parents getting old and dying. That's not a nice stage. And then realizing that kind of we the next old toppies coming down the line, that we're heading in that direction of now being the kind of getting to past middle age almost. No, actually, not almost. And I think that's it probably, really, in terms of,
Great.
I think the reality check too of significance in life, that you realize you passed halfway, and time just seems to go faster, and so you get more focused on what's going to be significant and what's going to be lasting, because you get a sense time's running out.
Wonderful, thank you. Next question that I'd like to, and I just want to throw this one out there. If you feel like you want to tackle it, go for it. What, in your understanding, is the purpose of marriage, and did that change when you got married? Your understanding of the purpose of marriage and what it's for.
I was reading actually that a while ago that marriage was the first institution that God put in the Bible for us, and it's meant to be a picture of His love. And if you know the verses about Jesus being the groom and the church His bride, it's a beautiful picture. And so for me, the main purpose of marriage is meant to be that we are a witness to God's love, a testimony for His love, and that would be our desire to show that.
So I believe that when Glenn and I started dating, we were both complete individuals, and we didn't get together to complete one another. And that in being married, we're able to have our joint purpose for the kingdom come together and complement one another. So it's not a case of I've got half the picture and Glenn's got half the picture, and then together it works. It's more, I've got my role in the kingdom, he's got his role, and together we get to have it be infinitely better and stronger, and yeah, just more cool.
And one thing to add on to that, because I agree with all of that stuff, and there's one other thing that I feel that marriage is, another purpose of marriage is actually a gift from God to us. And like, there's a romantic aspect to it that we can sometimes, I know Kelly and I have sometimes, over-spiritualized things and forgotten sometimes, oh my gosh, there's this beautiful gift as well. That is also just this amazing gift that we can have this love between each other and this closeness between one another. And I think that's another beautiful purpose of marriage, is to be able to be close with someone. And in that way, it kind of is a witness to how your relationship with God can be, because it gives you a bit of a snapshot of that intimacy that you can have with God.
Wonderful. Roles and mans, I'd like to start with you guys, and then if the others want to jump in on this one, you guys can too. But following on from that, how have your expectations of married life and of marriage shifted since you guys have been married?
I think in some ways, like, the more challenging thing is, like, because we've been friends for so long and communication has always been so easy and hanging out has always been so easy, I think the slight change in expectation is that I thought it would always still be that easy. Like, you don't really have to work at communication because you just know how to communicate because we've been friends forever. But then you get married and you realize, oh wait, there's actually things I don't know about you, or things you don't know about me, or there's ways that I communicate that you don't yet know. And so I think it's always a growing thing, which is such an exciting thing, because you think you know somebody and love them, but as you keep growing together, as you keep journeying together, as you keep getting to know them in a deeper way, and figuring out their heart and their mind and how they really think and how you really think, I think it keeps growing and it keeps getting better. So in some ways that's been a challenge, because I always just thought it would be easy, and I've actually realized you have to work at communicating, you have to work at getting to understand each other and getting to know each other.
Just want to add, I totally agree with that. I just want to say that my expectations for marriage have been exceeded. Marriage, I had like high expectations going in, and just honestly, marriage is so much better than I thought it was going to be for a number of different reasons. But it's also been incredibly challenging in ways that I never expected it to be. So exactly what Mans just said, you just have this sense. I mean, we were friends, we had the blessing of being friends for a long time, and there's that momentum of your friendship which sort of like carries you forward, and you think that's going to be enough. But you go into marriage and you realize, like, my marriage is not good because my friendship years ago was good. There's a real sense of having to work, and I think you can be taken off guard a little bit if you're naive to the fact that you actually have to still work. So you sort of like seal the deal, you get married, and you really have to put effort in, and it's a huge blessing. But I think those were expectations. I was just like, we've got this. You hear stories from other people, about how difficult it is, but you always think it's like the exception clause, your friendship is the one that's different, your marriage is the one that's different, but the reason why everybody shares the same stuff about marriage who loves the Lord is because it's the same for most people, almost everyone. It's a super blessing, but also it's going to be tough.
Anyone else want to jump in before we move on?
Yeah, I think for us, probably one of the biggest challenges, in a sense, was realizing that the kind of idealistic, kind of beautiful, romantic thing about marriage obviously is there, but the kind of routine of doing life together and all the kind of stuff of running a home is quite a shock to the system. Both of us had sort of not kind of lived independently of our families, and so the reality of shared chores and the washing and the dishes and mowing the lawn and whatever, one really needs to work through and share all those tasks. So I think that's quite a kind of shock to the system in terms of the hard work part of just doing life together. But obviously it's fun too. It's not kind of all boring. I learned a trick quite early on that Linda's very fast and gets everything done. And so I learned that if I wash the dishes very slowly, then she'll get irritated and she'll take over.
I think if we look back on our whole married life, you have expectations of every stage. And when we got married, I was still a student. We had a motorbike. We went to varsity every day. It was so cool. We thought that's just life, how we do marriage. And then reality sets in, and we're both working, and then children come, and that's another big expectation. This, not just happy sitting having tea.
The motorbike had to go when the children came.
Yes. And then as you, like now we've just been kind of all still going through that whole empty nest thing. It's another, I thought it would be something like this, and I've had to adjust my thinking, and we've had to look at our relationship again and say, okay, this isn't quite what we expected, it's harder, and then you draw strength from each other.
Great. Mans, you mentioned about learning one another. There's this, and you don't have to answer this, but maybe also Glenn and Kelly could speak into this. We hear about the love languages. There's a book that's been written, and a lot of people speak about the love languages. Have you found that helpful, and how have you found that helpful? Clearly, I've chose the right question here.
We were actually discussing this before home, and we're like, shucks, we've never read the book. And I said, well, I think yours is this and this. And he was like, I'm not sure we're going to get the book, so we'll get back to you.
Did you Google, man?
Okay, no, hold on. I can answer this. I know my wife, or I don't need the book, right? So I've found it very helpful to know that you can wrap a stone and give it to Mandy as a present. She'll be happy, all right? So it's really been a blessing to know that it does help. The love language is not a stupid idea, but I wouldn't say that there's only 5. I think you need to discover each other, know each other well, and definitely employ them as much as possible. I'm still figuring out what mine is, but definitely give Mandy a present and your friends forever. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, we haven't read the book either. Kelly has read the book. Failed to mention that in the preparation stages. So, yeah, no, I think one of the things for us is that whole idea of recognizing, and I think you touched on that, Roland, recognizing what makes the other one tick in terms of what their expression of love is and how they receive love. And so for me to understand, like a big one for Kelly's act of service, like let me not go and do something that's not going to speak to her, but let me rather do something that's act of service. So for me, I'll like try and make an effort even if it's something small, like there's a glass in the lounge, let me take it to the kitchen so that she doesn't have to do that, because for her that means something. And so trying to speak on her level and on her in her language. Yeah.
Great. We're going to pick up the pace a little bit because I definitely want to get through some of these. We've spoken about learning about your spouse, learning one another. What are some of the things that you've learned? That was very quick. What are some of the things you guys have maybe learned about yourselves through marriage? I know Tim Keller also speaks about this. He says, the person you marry will change. The person you're married to is not necessarily the same person you're married to 10, 20 years down the line. So how have you changed, and how maybe even have you seen one another change, and particularly what are some of the big things you've learned about yourself through marriage? And I'll leave that open to everyone.
I'll just start quickly because there's two things that we both said immediately when we spoke about this. We learned that we're a lot more selfish and a lot more proud than we thought we were before we got married. So yeah, do you want to elaborate on that? And we've got to work through that because it's very difficult to say sorry sometimes when you're in a conflict, but that's what our thing is. We've got to learn to say sorry and recognizing, did I do something wrong? Then I've got to say sorry. I can't be proud and hold on to that, because if I do that, then there's poison and it festers.
Yeah, so for me, I think before I was married, because of my past, I had quite a hectic past before. So when I got saved, I was quite intentional in having the Lord work and refine and character stuff. You know, like it was something I was really big on. And I kind of felt that I'd come to this place. I was like, oh, I'm doing quite well. You know, a lot of my character things are quite sorted, and I think I'm good now. And then I got married. And then the Lord just I think you can only grow to a certain point, and don't shoot me here, but when you're single. But when you get married, all of a sudden you realize there's more stuff in your heart that needs to be worked on. And then you have kids and you realize, oh my goodness, I'm not as patient as I thought, I'm not as gracious as I thought, or whatever. So I think the Lord has really, through this, just used it as a refining time, which sounds bad, but actually it's so good, because as He refines us, we become more like Him.
Great. So some key things were mentioned there that really play a role in terms of arguments and conflict. I know, Rolls, you've mentioned to me that you and Mandy have intense fellowship sessions. Would you like to unpack that and maybe just speak about how do you guys resolve arguments when they do happen? Just speak into that space.
All right, so we do call it intense fellowship, all right? Because, and it sounds cheesy, but I really love it because it speaks to something that I think is incredibly important. I say intense fellowship instead of arguing and fighting because it reminds me of the fact that we are actually supposed to be partnering together. So I think when we speak about having an argument, it's okay. So you use whatever you want to use to describe what it is that you do when you're not in agreement with one another. But we just call it intense fellowship, or at least I do. And we've had intense fellowship about a lot of stuff, right? And some of it's more intense than others, all right? But it's always fellowship. And I think one of the things that comes to mind was we had one of those times we were arguing about whether we should argue in front of the kids. All right, now that sounds funny, but my reasoning was they need to see mom and dad resolve stuff. And Mandy was like, "This is for behind closed doors." All right, I was like, "This is not." And actually, I got to a point where I was becoming, not so pleasant to be around. And at that stage, it probably wasn't good for the kids to be there. But this is how we resolved it. I think just realizing that this person's part of your team. You are one together. You're not an individual and by yourself and can just come and go. Actually, in marriage, you're united. You're one flesh. You become one person before the Lord. And I think there's a real biblical principle here. As soon as I start to dishonor my wife, I actually dishonor myself. As soon as I start to break her down, I break myself down, and vice versa. And so I think you have to come to the place where you're going, I need to love my wife like I love myself, because I am loving myself and I'm loving her at the same time. And that might sound strange, but it's like biblically true. And I think we resolve it, we do, by taking some time, right? We definitely can't argue or fellowship intensely late into the evening, right? Because then it just goes south, right? Sometimes you need to speak it out. I think if you stick too hard and fast to that, let's not let the sun go down in an argument, you can be there until the sun comes up again, and then the argument's even worse, and you don't even know how you got to where you are. It's just been this train of destruction. And so I think we've got to this point where we're tired, we go to bed, or we sit and we think about it. And most of the time, Mandy comes back and says sorry, so... I'm just joking. No, I'm joking. Most of the time we come back together and they...
There might be an intense fellowship session tonight, so I'm just saying.
No, my wife is incredibly gracious, and I say that jest, but she'll even say sorry for stuff she doesn't have to say sorry for, and that's how we resolve it. I think just humble and remembering that this is the person God's given you, and there's no one like them. Yeah.
I'll give space for one more.
I think in terms of managing conflict, what is very important is to make sure that you don't avoid it. I grew up in a family where we tended to avoid conflict. If I had a problem with you, then I would chat to you and say, please go and kind of pass on the message. That's very unhealthy and something that I learned. And so it's important to speak out about stuff and tackle it and face it and make sure you deal with it and not avoid it. And kind of the long silences and no speaks kind of stuff, that's really unhelpful. And I think what also, especially being further down the road than some of these couples, what is also important is to realize that you're going to go through really stressful times. You know? If you're blessed with children, small children usually come when you're kind of at the most stressful part of your career. And sadly, you tend to take out your frustrations on your spouse because it's a safe place when you get home and you've had a rough day and things are very stressful. You do tend to kind of a bucket dump, as they call it, on your poor wife when you get home. And so things can be really tough. So you've got to be able to deal with that and be open and honest and talk to each other.
Open question for all of you then. How have you guys in your marriage incorporated mentorship and counseling, if you have? How have you incorporated mentorship and or counseling in your marriage, if you have?
So Glenn and I are both really blessed that we each have parents that are still married. And so both sets of parents are such a godly example to us of what marriage is supposed to be. And so we spend a lot of time with our families, and we also make a point of surrounding ourselves with people who are older than us, that love marriage and that are just an inspiration to us just in doing life with people. So we don't necessarily sit down with the same couple once a week and have intense conversations about our marriage and theirs, but just in doing life with people who are doing marriage really well and are able to honor each other and honor God in their marriage is something that I love.
Yeah, I think we would be exactly the same. Mark and I also were privileged to grow up with Christian parents, and also because then therefore we've been involved in church since we were very little. We've seen marriages, and in fact there are some still today that we would want to emulate, even as though they are now in their 80s. It's something that we really would strive for. We were also given advice by my parents actually when we got married that if we did have marital problems that we wouldn't talk to friends, and that we would seek professional objective counseling outside of our circle. We haven't had to deal with such a thing, but we've had our own individual mentors, although that hasn't kind of been a marriage thing. But I think I agree with what Kelly and Glenn are saying, that they're just these people that you surround yourself with. That if there were problems, you feel you would have a place to go.
Right. Starting with roles and bands, what maybe are some of the boundaries that you guys set in place as a couple? Are there boundaries that had to be set in place as a married couple, and what were they?
Yeah, I think just a few, because there are tons, and I think despite popular belief, there actually need to be boundaries in marriage. I think for me straight away, just think about the season we're in with our kids. I think the way we discipline our kids, there are boundaries set there. I think neither of us push that because we want to honor each other and we honor our kids, and we realize that we both share wisdom to speak into an issue, and sometimes we differ, but we've often found places where we agree and we set up boundaries like that. Obviously, when it comes to disagreeing, how far we take a disagreement and how we continue with it, I think there's boundaries there. And I think just for myself also personally, as a man, to honor my wife, there's certain boundaries that we've spoken about that I've set up when it comes to me, and especially the nature of my job, being in ministry, what I will and won't do when it comes to dealing with ladies. So where I'll set up boundaries, Mandy knows strictly where those are, and I know where they are. And I think that's one of the most important boundaries we have. And I think just, in raising kids, there's like tons. What we'll expose them to, where we allow them to go, what we allow them to do, that sort of stuff. Those are some of the real strict boundaries that we have in place in our lives, yeah.
Anyone else want to speak into that?
Yeah, just three points in terms of boundaries that we've set. One is that we don't have secrets from each other. And an example of that is our phones. We both know each other's passwords, and not that we use each other's phones often, but we both are quite happy to have the other person look at our phones and read our messages. So I think that's quite an important one. Also, not sharing intimate details of our marriage relationship with others. That's very important. Not to talk outside of the marriage without permission. And then the third one, which I think is an important one, is a pact to not belittle each other in front of others or our children. I think that's very important. Raul's made a similar point.
Really great. Starting with Glenn and Kelly, how has your role in community, particularly in the church community here at Connect, how has that shifted? How has that changed from when you were single to when you got married?
So in terms of how our role in terms of ministry has changed, we don't feel it's changed too much because we started as we got engaged and as we've been dating, started slowly doing things together and doing ministry together. But I think as far as how's our role in church changed, it's changed, in the way that we relate to people. Complete forgot. Sometimes you forget the thought.
How has the role changed?
Yes,
how have you stayed plugged in?
No. I remember the question. I forgot the answer. Exam situation. So basically, happen again. Yes. Okay. One of the things we're trying to do.
Borrow my notes.
Could I please? I'll just answer your questions. People think I've 33 years worth of experience. It's amazing. So one of the things that we've wanted to do since we've got married is like we've set ourselves alongside older people to just learn from them and just watch them and talk to them about how marriage is done. We want to, come alongside people who are in a life stage before us. So are you dating, are you engaged? And just walk a road with you. And not that we have masses of experience, but just, it's short, it's like on the brain, we know the challenges of those stages, and just be able to do life with those people and come alongside them. It doesn't even have to be a formal thing, but it's just a thing of like, minister, because now we're in marriage, in this place of marriage, we can minister to people who are thinking about getting married, and just help if they need help and anything like that.
Jumping to Linda and Mark then, how have you guys stayed plugged in over the season of your almost 30 years of marriage?
As I said earlier, we both grew up in homes where our folks were very involved in the church, so we kind of lived at church on Sundays, and we wanted to carry that forward. So we love Sundays. We love being at church. When our kids were little, they sat at the back like some moms bring now with my food and whatever. And we kind of tried to get involved wherever we could, because at some stages it's very hard, like Rolls and Mandy are in that stage now, it's hard. So we kind of just tried to slot in where our kids were. So if in Joburg, when we moved up to Joburg, we ran the kids club there because they went and we didn't have to find babysitters. But I think, so we've kind of tried to see, and as they've left home, we've got more flexibility, we've had more time, we could get involved in things outside the church, but still, we always felt that like our work is our ministry and is our mission field, but we wanted to do something extra. And because we have a love of church, it's just like it's a pleasurable thing. And I think there's great value in what Glenn and Kelly are saying, where you learn from life experience, and even if you're only just a little bit ahead, you do. And the beauty of church, and that's what makes me sad, is it's two things. You go to receive, but you also go to give. And I wish I could inspire people more, because when you don't go, you miss out, but so do other people. And we've had the blessing of other people speaking into our lives, and that's what I love about the service, this intergen thing, that we can all learn from each other. And I think I want to encourage you at every stage of your life going forward. Stay plugged in. I know, also just quickly want to share, Mark and I moved to Joburg when our girls were 10 months old, and I'd grown up in Cape Town. I knew I could go to any church, even an NGO one, and I'd probably know someone. And I got to Joburg and didn't know anybody, and we stood there after church having our tea with these two beautiful babies, and everyone would come and say, "Oh, cute babies," and they'd move on. And it was a real wake-up call for Mark and I. It was a hard time, and until we really got plugged in our church, we had no family. But it changed just like that when we made friends, and so we just love church, and it's our life, really. We just love having Sundays.
Kelly?
So similar to what Linda and Mark were saying, for us, we love community. And so something that we've been very intentional and deliberate about is not just doing a whole lot of stuff on our own, not leaving social gatherings super early so we can hang out alone, but actually being very intentional about spending time with people. And when we are with people, not only hanging out with each other and sitting like this and like being like attached to the hip, but actually being in a space with people and actually hanging out with the people that are there. That's like a very intentional decision that we've made to actually be in community and not just be hanging out in community, but with each other.
Great. We've got a few more questions and we're running out of time, but I'm going to jump to you, Rolls. The concept, there's a concept called the 7-year itch that people speak about. It's this fear of lifelong commitment is really what it boils down to. How did you wrestle with that? Did you wrestle with that? And how can people who maybe are wrestling with that wrestle with it?
Yeah. So
lots of wrestling.
So I know this might sound weird, but I dealt with, and I think most people do if you're serious about marriage, I dealt with the fear of lifelong commitment before we got married. And then I journeyed that. And it's like trying to contemplate space and it never ends. You know, it's just, it blows your mind. And I say that in a very real way, but I sat there thinking about being committed to one person for the rest of my life. And it was never, Mandy's not good enough for that. It was, do I have the ability to do that? I think was more the question that I was wrestling with. And I remember chatting to Pastor John about that. And after some really good conversation, I came out humbled, rebuked, and challenged to not be so selfish and to trust the Lord. And I really appreciated that, and God really did speak to me in that. And so I committed to trust in God and relying on Him. And I haven't really struggled with that since. One more thing, sorry, Brian. I have thought though, and I'm going to be honest because I think we must be honest here. I have thought at times when it's been really difficult, you know, what would have happened? What would my life have been like if I was single? It's like it's never been about someone else or what would have been like if I'd married to this person. It was what would have happened if I'd never got married. And then I'm hit with the very real reality that as people we tend to always analyze the best of where we're not when we're in the worst of where we are. And so there's a sense in which like the grass is always greener. And I know for a fact that if I wasn't married and I hadn't met Mandy, I'd be sitting there going, oh man, I wonder what it'd be like if I was married, if I just wasn't single. You know, and you always ask that question when the worst of the worst is happening to you when you're single. And you always ask those questions about not being married when you're in a really tough place in marriage. But it's always come back to like, this is my decision, this is God's best. And I really do enjoy that every single day. It's like I wouldn't really actually want to be anywhere else.
Thanks, Rolls. Jumping to Linda and Mark. How have you guys, so-called, kept the spark alive as our experts? How have you maintained intimacy over the years?
Yeah, Mark said I can start. I think, unfortunately, a lot of marriages go into difficulty at our stage. And, you know, there are those kind of jokes that midlife men get a new wife, a new car, or a new job. And actually, the reality is that you do have to work at things, but I don't mean that in a laborious, horrible way. And so we've just jotted a few things down. Mark and I have an annual date. I mean, we have more dates, but the annual date is on our anniversary, we go away for a night and we discuss out of 1 to 10 areas of our life as a couple. So how are our finances doing? How's our how is our parenting going? How is our intimacy going? And we rate ourselves, and if we've got it, well, we discuss the rating and why it's low, what we can do, whatever. And I'm not going to talk too much about physical intimacy. I know how young people are very grossed out by old people talking about anything intimate. So Mark and I were just saying that it's important at every single stage of your life. That part of your marriage is very important, and it's crucial. So the honeymoon phase is all very exciting. It changes as you change and you go through seasons in your life. So that physical intimacy changes, but it remains very important. And if there are struggles in that area, it affects everything, and help should be sought. We like to have lots of dates, and I think it's important. They don't have to be expensive. People kind of think that a date is like always getting dressed up. And Mark and I, we actually love going for coffee, so I'm a very cheap date, actually. Except I often pay out of my money, hey. I'm only joking. So yeah, dates, we do like that. And I think the other thing is keeping spontaneity. Also, at our age, it's quite hard. You sort of get a bit set in your ways, and I hate to admit that. Often I sit in the same place at church, and I'm decided I must really change that because you've got to change it up all the time. But keeping spontaneity alive, and like not of the normal, like Thursday night, we normally do this, have supper, Mark come home and say, well, let's get on the scooter and go down to Muizenberg for a walk on the beach, that kind of thing. Things fun. And doing fun things together. We love swimming at Dalebrook in the mornings, and we like sports, so we do a lot of fun things and that kind of thing. And then the other thing we thought of also is travel and going to different places. And again, this doesn't have to be expensive, but just there's something about, for me, packing a bag and going over Solari's Pass or through the tunnel, just exploring new things together so you keep making new memories. I think that's kind of what we
Great. Well, we've got to wrap up now, but I'm going to ask you all to answer one last question in literally a sentence. Mark just speaks about how we're often always looking for we often have a list of the things we want in a spouse, but very less of the time we don't have a list of the things we should be to be ready to be a spouse. And so what are some of the things you guys have done that prepared you to be the best spouse that you could be?
It's one of the things that I prepared myself to be, and also I'm still learning, and I think I'm going to continue to learning, is selflessness. And to be a servant to my wife, which I get wrong very often, but like that's something that the Holy Spirit has been convicting me more and more of, having a servant heart towards your wife.
The only requirement that I had for a husband, and the thing that I expected of myself, is that we would love Jesus more than we love each other, and that's also a thing that we're constantly growing.
Yeah, I think exactly that. I think my words were just constantly teaching myself to prioritize Jesus over my family. And that's it, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And then also just continue learning to honor the other person. Our nature can get ugly. To honor that person and to love that person.
Yeah, I think, again, agreeing with everything, keeping the Lord foremost, and it's sometimes hard when you are in a busy stage of life, and seeking to be a servant, and I would also say being able to communicate well.
Yeah, not much more to add from all of that. I think the servant heart thing probably encompasses it all. Because one can, I think selfishness is a big kind of danger in any relationship, especially in marriage. And so that kind of selflessness and looking to please your spouse and putting yourself second sometimes, I think that's very important.
Great. Well, thanks to our panel. Honor you guys and the marriages that you have and the examples that you've said. We're really blessed that you've shared with us this evening, and we just want to thank you. They will make themselves available after the service. If there was a question that wasn't asked, or if they said something you didn't understand, come and find them, and they will more than happily give you some of their time because they love community. Our series on community and relationships has come to an end, but we're going to go into worship now. So the worship team can come up. You can stand. I'm going to pray for us, and we're going to go into a time of worship.